What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Sideswipe the Boss, back at it again with another tier list. And yes, I am back. I just took a little bit of time off so I could focus more on school. I know it's been like at least a month since I posted a video, but I am back. School is over for the summer, so I'm back to making videos for you guys. And, I just decided to start off easy with another tier list. And with Loki being the next MCU show that comes out, I think in like a few weeks, I decided to, go back and do a tier list on the main villains of the MCU. And just like always, if you do enjoy this video, just hit that like button. It takes 2 seconds. And subscribe to the channel if you're new. We're still on the road to 1,000 subscribers. I recently hit 700, so thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. We're getting a little closer to 1,000 subscribers every day. So just keep on liking and keep on subscribing, and the support will be very appreciated. So as you can see, this tier list is a little bigger than like my usual format. Usually I have 2 rows, but I needed to add a third one for this one. So hopefully this video isn't too long, but without further ado, let's just get into the tier list. So first up we have Mysterio, aka Quentin Beck, and he was a cool villain. He was the main villain of Spider-Man Far From Home. I really liked the Mysterio suit. Who knew that the fishbowl head could actually look cool in live action? Because I always thought it was a goofy design in like the comics and the TV shows, but they kind of made it awesome in this movie. And he was a good villain, he was threatening. I liked his rivalry with Peter. It was cool. And, even after his like supposed death, he's still pulling the strings and outed Spider-Man as a criminal and outed him as Peter Parker. So he's just a great villain overall. Definitely, I'd say at least in the top 10 for me for MCU villains. So he's going to go in the A tier. Next up, we have Obadiah Stane, aka Ironmonger, and he was the main villain of Iron Man, the first one, the first MCU movie. And he was pretty solid, Wasn't really too interesting of a villain, but he definitely was a solid villain to start up the MCU as a whole. And the suit was kind of cool, so he's going to go in the C tier. Next up, we have Ghost, aka I forgot her real name, but she was fine, I guess. I mean, the only thing interesting about her was really her powers and the suit. Everything else was kind of just faded into black for me. Like, I don't even remember her backstory that well. So, she's just going to go in the D tier. Her powers were cool and the suit was kind of cool, but other than that, not a very interesting villain. Next up, we have Aisha. I think that's what her name was. She was one of the villains of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And she was to be honest. Like, she wasn't that interesting. She's very conceited. And she didn't really do much either. Except, scream a lot. And have a lot of sarcasm and stuff. I mean, she did create or start the creation for Adam Warlock at like the post-credit scene, but other than that, she wasn't a very interesting villain either, so she's also going to go in the D tier. Next up, we have Aldrich Killian, aka the Mandarin, quote unquote, because he's not the actual Mandarin, but he was the villain of Iron Man 3, and he was as well. Like, he wasn't a very interesting villain. I mean, I guess he had a sort of decent backstory, but I mean, it wasn't too interesting at all. And I mean, his powers were kind of cool, but once again, he wasn't a very memorable main villain. So he's going to go at the top of the D tier. Next up, we have Agnes, aka Agatha Harkness, the villain of WandaVision. And I actually liked her as a villain. I've been seeing on Twitter lately that not a lot of people liked her as a villain, or at least it's like half and half. And I actually liked her as a villain. She was cool. I mean, you could see the villain change like a mile away because, come on, Agatha Harkness, come on now. But she was still cool nonetheless. She's very threatening, at least to Wanda. And I like that. And I like all the psychological warfare she was playing on Wanda. And yeah, her powers are cool as well, although they're kind of like just Wanda's powers with purple. But, she was still a cool villain nonetheless, and I hope to see more of her in the future. So she's going to go in the B tier for me. Next up, we have Ivan Vanko, aka Whiplash, and I did not like him at all. He was really, really bad. He only fought Iron Man, I think, twice. And then for, the rest of the movie, he was either in prison or in a shop working on something. He was not very interesting at all. And I don't even know why he made his own suit for that final battle, if it was just going to get destroyed so easily. So he's going in the F tier. He's not a good villain at all. Next up, we have Ultron. And Ultron is kind of an underrated villain, to be honest. He's not as bad as some people make him out to be. I mean, he was threatening to the Avengers, This man was on the internet for 5 minutes and deemed humanity incapable of saving and said, I'm just going to destroy Earth and all that will be left is metal. Bruh, I want to know what he saw. But yeah, honestly, he was a cool villain, Age of Ultron is not my favorite MCU movie, but Ultron is definitely a standout of that movie for real. So he's going to go in the B tier, just below Agatha for me. Next up, we have Batroc, the Leaper, and he's an alright villain, He's not really a main villain. He's kind of just like a side villain that I just decided to include on here. He appeared first in the Winter Soldier, then got beat up by Cap. Then he appears again in Falcon and the Winter Soldier a few times before he's whacked by Sharon Carter, which sucked in my opinion. But other than that, he's a decent villain, He had a pretty decent rivalry against Cap and against Falcon, fitting as they're both Cap. But, he's just all right, I wish he had more screen time, especially fighting against Spider-Man, because that probably would have been a great battle. But he's going to go in the C tier, just above Ironmonger. Next up, we have Killmonger, and Killmonger is probably in my top 5 favorite MCU villains, because he's just so great. He's very threatening. He has a great rivalry with T'Challa. He has some cool fight scenes. He has good intentions for his plan, but it's just, the ends don't always justify the means. But overall, he's just a great villain overall. And there's a theory out there that they might resurrect him. I mean, I'm not really too keen on that theory, but I will never say no to more Killmonger. So he's gonna go in the S tier for me. First one in the S tier. Yes, sir. Next up, we have Ronan, and Ronan is a pretty alright villain, He has some cool powers, That hammer's kind of cool, and he has some decent fight scenes. He put the whooping on Drax, for real. But he's kind of not all that interesting. He's emotionless and stuff like that, except when he's yelling and stuff. But he's just an alright villain to me. Nothing too interesting. So he's gonna go at the bottom of the C tier. Next up, we have Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, and this is when he was a villain, not counting his hero time. I'm only counting his villain time, and he is my favorite MCU villain. He is awesome. The fight scenes are great with him. He's threatening. Well, not to the superpower people, but I mean, he was only in Winter Soldier. Well, Captain America Winter Soldier. So it works, but he's just very threatening. He has great fight scenes. The rivalry between him and Steve is just awesome. And, I always like it whenever we get a little bit of evil Winter Soldier whenever Bucky kind of goes down the deep end, because it's always awesome to see that. So he's going at the top of the S tier. Next up, we have Loki, and Loki is definitely going in the S tier. Who doesn't like Loki? Loki is just so lovable. He's like a lovable villain. You know, he had a great redemption arc throughout the MCU, and I can't wait to see more of him in his own show. It's just going to be great and probably make me love the character of Loki even more. So definitely S tier for Loki. Next up, we have Dormammu, and he only appeared like for a few minutes in Doctor Strange, but he was really awesome for those few minutes. He seems very threatening and cool. All those ways he killed Doctor Strange in the time loop was cool. And I mean, yeah, he got caught in the time loop, so I guess that's kind of made him lose his mind a little bit. But I want to see more of him. I hope Dormammu makes an appearance in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. But he's going to go in the B tier, at the top of the B tier for me. Next up, we have Carly Morgenthau. She was the leader of the Flag Smashers in the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show, and she was the main villain of that TV show. And I mean, I was kind of expecting someone else to be the main villain, but, you know, she turned out to be, and I mean, she was fine as like a side character, I guess, but not a main villain for me. She was alright, I guess. She had some pretty decent fight scenes, but I mean, she wasn't too interesting. So she's gonna go at the bottom of the C tier for me. Next up, we have Ego, and Ego is a pretty cool main villain. He's the main villain of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. He has a great rivalry with, like, you know, his son, Peter Quill. He has some pretty cool powers, you know, with him being a whole planet itself. That's pretty cool. And, you know, Kurt Russell just does a great job in the role. So he's going to go at the top of the B tier for me. Next up, we have Hela, and she was the villain of Thor Ragnarok. And she was pretty cool as well. Like, I think this is the time in like phase 3 where Marvel is just giving us like great villains. Because, you know, phase 2, they kind of like were getting called out for their copy paste generic villains. But Hela was a great villain of phase 3. You know, she had some pretty cool fight scenes. She was very powerful. And she had to be stopped by a giant fire demon. And that's what took her out. So it took a lot. And Asgard blew up. It took a lot to destroy Hela. And, you know, she was just a great main villain overall. So she's going to go in the A tier below Mysterio. Next up, we have Crossbones. And he was a pretty alright villain. He wasn't really a main villain in any movie, but he was like, you know, in Winter Soldier, and he was in the beginning of Civil War, and he was pretty cool. You know, he has some cool fight scenes for sure, but then he got, you know, taken out. Well, he didn't get taken out, he blew himself up. But, you know, he was still pretty cool, and he had a decent rivalry with Cap and Falcon in those two movies. So he's gonna go at the top of the C tier for me. Hey, C for Crossbones. Next up, we got the homie Thanos, the big boy himself. And you already know Thanos is going in the S tier. Like, come on now. It would be a crime if I didn't put Thanos in the S tier. He's just going to go below Winter Soldier and Loki because I like those two people a little bit better. But Thanos is just awesome, you know. Great backstory, great motivation, some great fight scenes. He won at the end. He's like one of the few main villains to actually win at the end of, you know, all they're trying to do. And the Avengers had to go back in time just to stop him. So, you know, he's just an awesome main villain overall. So that's why he's going in the S tier. Next up, we have Abomination, and Abomination is underrated. He is underrated. I really liked him in the Hulk movie. He was definitely one of the few good things about that movie. You know, him being, I think it's Emil Blonsky. I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but I know it was Blonsky, his last name. And he was cool as, you know, like a regular human and stuff. But when he turned into Abomination, he just became like a beast. Like he was wrecking stuff left and right, you know, wrecking the Hulk. It took the Hulk like almost all his strength just to beat Abomination. And I just hope that we get to see more of Abomination in the future. I hear he might be coming back in the She-Hulk series, so that's going to be pretty cool. But he's going to go at the bottom of the B tier for me. He's definitely an underrated villain of the MCU. Next up, we have Caecilius. He was technically like the main villain of Doctor Strange, even though he was kind of, you know, like a little bit like a herald of Dormammu or something like that. And he was, to be honest. He wasn't too interesting. I mean, he basically just conjured the same powers as most of the other sorcerers did, except those like little clear spears, I guess. But that's basically all he had going for him. He wasn't really that interesting. So he's going to go in the D tier. He'll go at the top of the D tier. Next up, we have Yon-Rogg, the main villain of the Captain Marvel movie. And he did not help that movie at all. He was not a very interesting villain. He wasn't even an interesting character, to be honest. You know, all he did was have his, not even powers, I guess. I think it was just like technology off the Kree planet. So he wasn't a very interesting main villain at all. So he's going to go also in the D tier, but like below Ghost. Next up, we have Yellow Jacket, aka Darren Cross. And he was also not a very interesting villain. I know I'm kind of going on a streak here, but I mean, some movies are dark movies for the MCU. And, like, he wasn't a very interesting main villain. All he had going for him was his suit. I really do like the Yellow Jacket suit, but other than that, he wasn't a very interesting main villain. I mean, he was just like a stereotypical rich guy villain. So he's going to go also in the D tier, but above Yon-Rogg. Next up, we have Red Skull. And if I was just purely going off of like the first Avenger, he'd probably go in like the C tier. But because of his 2 appearances in Infinity War and Endgame, he's going to go a little bit higher because I did not expect him to show back up at all. And those appearances were cool. But he was a pretty decent villain in the first Avenger too. You know, him and Cap had a pretty good rivalry, you know, and had some cool fight scenes and stuff. He wasn't too good in that movie, but I mean, he was fine. But also combined it with his Infinity War and Endgame appearances, Red Skull is going to go in the B tier, at the bottom of the B tier, because I like those appearances, him, you know, coming back. Next up, we have Justin Hammer, and, you know, I like Sam Rockwell as much as the next guy, but, you know, great acting is one thing, but combined with bad writing, I don't know. Justin Hammer didn't really work for me that well. I mean, he was kind of funny, but that's really all he had going for him, to be honest. Hopefully he appears again, maybe in like the Armor War series, so he can get more screen time and flesh out his character more than Iron Man 2 did. But he's just going to go at the top of the D tier for me. Next up, we have Alexander Pierce, and he was like, I guess, another main villain of Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I guess, yeah, because he was controlling the Winter Soldier. But he was pretty cool, you know. He didn't really do any fighting or anything, but, you know, he was behind the scenes, you know, pulling the strings of the Winter Soldier, pulling the strings behind S.H.I.E.L.D., or at least Hydra's takeover of S.H.I.E.L.D. And, yeah, he was cool. definitely kind of underrated as well. So he's going to go in the B tier, just above Agatha Harkness. Next up, we have Vulture. And Vulture was a great main villain. You always got to give props to Michael Keaton because he be acting his butt off for real. Like, he had a great rivalry with Peter in the movie. His Vulture suit was cool. Even though it was like kind of technical, but you could see it was like man-made and stuff. And you got to really appreciate that about the Vulture character. He had a pretty cool motivation, doing everything for his family and stuff. And he has some pretty great fight scenes as well. And he's very, very smart. And, we saw him in that Morbius trailer, like, what feels like years ago that trailer came out. So, he's coming back in the MCU. So I hope that he becomes more awesome than he already is. But he's going to go in the A tier, at the top of the A tier for me. Next up, we have Malekith, the Dark Elf, main villain of Thor: The Dark World, and he's going at the bottom of the F tier. Do I really have to explain myself about this one? Like, come on, he was awful, terrible, not even worth being the main villain at all whatsoever. Next up, we have Ulysses Claw. He was like a sort of made a guest appearance in Age of Ultron. Then he was like a supporting villain in Black Panther. And he was pretty cool, He was kind of funny as well. He had some pretty decent, or at least like one decent fight scene when he was using like his blaster hand in Black Panther. That was pretty cool as well. So he's going to go at the top of the C tier for me. Next up, we have Baron Zemo, and Baron Zemo has climbed the ranks for real, just because of Falcon and Winter Soldier. I like Zemo a whole lot more than I would have if he only made his appearance in Captain America: Civil War. He's very, very, very smart, very cunning, smart again. He's like kind of charming too with it. He's a baron, for crying out loud. He's rich. He got a butler. His butler be doing his dirty work too. Like, come on, man. That's just awesome. And we got the Zemo cut of him dancing. Gotta love that. And Zemo's just a great villain overall. I hope we get to see more of him in the future. Because, he's in the raft right now, but who says he can't make another appearance down the line? Maybe he could join, like, the Thunderbolts or Dark Avengers team, maybe. Hopefully, maybe. So he's going to go at the top of the A tier for me. And finally, we have Surtur. He was, like, the secondary villain of Thor Ragnarok. And he was pretty cool, He wasn't in the movie for too long. He got whooped at the beginning of the movie, but then showed up in all his glory at the end and destroyed Asgard and Hela in the process. So that was pretty cool nonetheless. So he's going to go in the B tier, just below Dormammu. So that's the tier list, folks. F tier, we have Whiplash and Malekith. D tier, we have Justin Hammer, Caecilius, Aldrich Killian, Ghost, Yellow Jacket, Jan Rog, and Aisha. C tier, we have Ulysses Claw, Crossbones, Batroc, Ironmonger, Ronan, and Carly. B tier, we have Ego, Dormammu, Surtur, Pierce, Agatha Harkness, Ultron, Abomination, and Red Skull. A tier, we have Zemo, Vulture, Mysterio, and Hela. And in the S tier, we have Winter Soldier, Loki, Thanos, and Killmonger. So that's the tier list, folks. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for, still coming back to the channel after my little break. I really appreciate that. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about the tier list. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Would you change anything about it? Just let me know that in the comments down below. Also, let me know if I forgot any villains, you know. I did like the main villains and a few side villains, but I think I'm still forgetting like a few more side villains. So just let me know that in the comment section down below. Also, let me know down there if what tier list you want to see next. And if you did enjoy this video, just hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And I will catch you guys next time. Peace out.